continue to understand what's going on. We're going to bring in former federal prosecutor, friend of the program, Neama Rahmani. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And of course, at long last, we did see some of those names on there, some big ones. What do we make of seeing some of those names, and what do you make of when the court unseals a document that had previously redacted names like this one?
Wendy, thanks for having me as always. And, I expected more after all these years. I mean, these documents really didn't live up to the hype, with one real exception, and that was Prince Andrew, of course. And he was sued directly by Virginia Jeffrey, and they settled shortly before trial. So if you're talking about potential charges, he's the only individual I can see, based on what's been released so far, that may face some criminal liability. Of course, Bill Clinton makes all the headlines, but when we're talking about something Jeffrey Epstein told one of the victims, that's hearsay. So it may be great for the court of public opinion, but it's not admissible in any court of law.
And like you said, the court of public opinion, of course, just names being involved or on this list don't really mean a ton of that. But when you're talking about high-profile figures like that Prince as well, maybe how much does that factor into when you have all these big names in there, and maybe how likely is it that charges could come from this unsealing?
Well, there's a lot of folks that are watching that believe that Jeffrey Epstein got a pass because he was rich and powerful and connected to folks who are rich and powerful. And that may well be true. Alex Acosta gave a sweetheart deal when he was U.S. attorney in Miami, giving him essentially a state prosecution, very little time that probably wouldn't be afforded to other people that didn't have the means to hire Alan Dershowitz. And ultimately, Jeffrey Epstein didn't get the criminal justice he deserved. Ghislaine Maxwell did, and she may die in federal prison. But there is a perception by a lot of people that we're just scratching the surface of Jeffrey Epstein and those who sexually abused minors with him. But this initial batch, it just doesn't get us to where we need to be. There may be more coming at a later time, but really what we saw when the 40 or so documents spanning 100 pages that was unsealed, really we're talking about discovery disputes, we're talking about allegations made by Virginia Jeffrey, but really nothing directly tying anyone particularly to sexual abuse, at least what has been revealed so far.
Yeah, so far this was just the tip potentially of the iceberg, and we don't know maybe how overwhelming, underwhelming the rest of the iceberg could be involving in this. But give me a little bit of a timeline, because we expected it out on Tuesday, and then Wednesday came and went, and now it's on Thursday, and we're discussing it coming out last night. How long could this maybe take to get the rest of these names, the documents out there from this unsealing, and could there be some pushback from people about this?
Well, frankly, Andy, I think this is something that should have been unsealed a long time ago. But I understand if a judge wants to protect the names of victims of sexual abuse, particularly minors, but there's a presumption that court documents in this country, they're public. So the fact that media outlets had to, file and try to get access, and that this is being done after many, many years. I mean, let's not forget, we're talking about a civil lawsuit between Virginia Jeffrey and Ghislaine Maxwell that has long since settled. There's no reason, certainly no good reason, for these documents to be sealed after all these years. So I agree with Alan Dershowitz, who was my former law professor at Harvard, that these documents, they need to be unsealed, especially when even the people accused aren't objecting to their unsealing. So I have a lot of concerns, and I understand why people are upset that these public documents have remained non-public for so long.
Yeah, and speaking of that, because like you mentioned, Alan Dershowitz saying he wants the rest of the documents, and it might not be a consensus that the rest of the people in these documents want them out. And speaking of maybe public opinion, because there's been discussion about Jimmy Kimmel being on it, and obviously Donald Trump and Bill Clinton were on this. Maybe do people that were potentially on this, already redacted or still redacted, do they have any case for that? Maybe what is the threshold to talk to a court, to talk to a judge about making sure that those documents, their names might not be out there, because the court of public opinion is a strong one in that?
There are some laws, privacy laws, protecting victims. But if you're accused of a crime, if you're named as a criminal defendant or a civil defendant, you generally have no right to keep that information public. Keep it non-public. It is public. Criminal defendants are prosecuted every single day in this country in public trials. People are named in civil lawsuits all the time, accusing them of sexual assault or sexual abuse. So the fact that a federal judge sealed these records for so long in the Southern District of New York didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially after the case has long since settled. And the vast majority of people say they have no objection to the unsealing. Even if they did, frankly, even if a Bill Clinton or an Alan Dershowitz or a Prince Andrew said, you know what, I want these documents to remain unsealed, my response would be, you're accused of a crime. You're accused of a civil wrong. You have no right to keep that information sealed and away from the public, because that's just not how we handle our trials in this country.
That is a very good point there as well. And this certainly is not the final chapter of this Jeffrey Epstein saga and the potential names coming out in it. Neama Rahmani, any parting words, any more notes you want to leave with our audience that maybe we didn't touch on that you want to let people know about?
Well, Andy, you talked about Jimmy Kimmel, obviously that's making news, but there are a couple of folks that I think might be a little bit concerned. David Copperfield was alleged to have asked one of the victims if she knew that girls were being paid to recruit other girls. Michael Jackson, of course, is deceased, but he was at Epstein's home in Florida, reportedly denied a massage. And then, of course, there's that infamous email where Epstein talks about Stephen Hawking allegedly having an orgy with underage girls. Don't know if there's any truth to that, but there's a lot of salacious allegations in these documents.
Yeah, a little bit underwhelming potentially on the names, but if you dive deep into them, it's certainly something to look at as well. All right, Neama Rahmani, thank you again for joining us, providing insight here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.